Hello, my name is Charlotte Patmore. I am Vote for Patmore on the internet, and this is my podcast. Today, I'm going to talk about how I got into music photography. No, I'm not. Today, I'm going to talk about how I got into photography, and how I got into music photography is a separate story. And so maybe I'll do a separate episode for that. Let's see how we get on with this one. This time, setting the scene, it must be like, I want to say 2008, which makes me want to cry. It's 2008. And I'm I'm doing my A levels. Basically, I did like fine in my GCSEs, but I didn't do as well as I could have done because I had undiagnosed dyslexia whilst I was at school, and nobody knew what dyslexia was, and that wasn't a notion. And I just couldn't spell and was kind of treated like I was dumb because of that, which was, you know, like a huge ableist issue. But my whole like high school experience was just like such a disservice because nobody understood what I needed. And like obviously as like a parent now, it's like my literal job to like advocate for another human being and make sure that they are supported and that they can access the help that they need. And I guess that education just like didn't exist. And even just the language around it didn't exist. I'd never heard of the term dyslexia until I moved to London. This is the first time where I like have proper autonomy over what I'm doing, I guess, in my life, because up until that point you're kind of just told what you have to do, and obviously you have to pick your GCSEs, but you have to do a lot of GCSEs on subjects that you don't want to do as well. And so I chose product design because I was good at it. I chose textiles because I wanted to be a fashion designer. If you listen to the fashion episode, you'll know about that. And then I chose business studies because I was like, obviously I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And then I chose English literature because I really liked stories and I really like storytelling. But once I started doing the lessons in English lit, again, I still have undiagnosed dyslexia and no one knows this word and no one understands. But basically, this teacher would just like shame me, like make me read out loud in class. And then if I struggled, would like mock me in front of everyone. And I was just like, this is disgusting, obviously, but also I don't have to be here. I don't need to be in this class. And so I was just like, I don't have to par with this. And it was a shame because I was excited to, read and like analyze these books. But yeah, I was just like, I'm not going to sit here for 2 years and be like spoken to like this. That's a joke. So then I asked to be moved and I want to be moved into travel and tourism because they had this like subject called travel and tourism. And I had this whole kind of like backup plan where I wanted to be an air hostess. I really want to be able to travel, and traveling is like a really important value to me. And I was like, if I become an air hostess, then I will like 100% be able to travel through my job. But the business studies teacher was also the travel and tourism teacher. And she was like, nah, you're so bad at business studies. And she was like, we aren't gonna, like, you will drag the grade down of like her whole section if she lets me in travel and tourism too. And she was like, no. like, respectfully, no, and she was just like, she was like, "You're good at art stuff, go do an art subject," and, like, that was said in a derogatory way, but whatever. So then I go into there was kinda like this student counselor or someone, like a career counselor who was, like, overseeing this process, and they were like, "What do you wanna do?" And I was like, "Well," like, I'm not gonna ever go step foot in that English class again, and I'm not allowed to do travel and tourism because I'm trash at business studies, and, like, everyone's telling me I should do an art subject because that's, like, the only thing I'm good at. And they sit me down and they have this really serious chat with me where they're like, "The art isn't real like that. You can't get a job from art, and that's, like, not a good career path. And, like, you can do art and have your little silly times, and, like, people, like, do an art subject, but they have a real subject that they study because they will get a job from their real subject." And I was like, "Okay, but, like, none of the real subjects want me, and, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do here." And they were like, "Okay." They were like, "We're very, very against letting people do free art subjects because it, like, in their eyes, ruins their life." I knew that I wanted to go to LCF or, like, Central St. Martin's, and, like, I wanted to move to London, I wanted to go to, like, an art school. So, I didn't really agree with their belief system that, like, art subjects are unproductive, but that was, like, a very, like, northern mindset that, like, we should choose a job that's safe, and, like, you should, like, squash all your dreams and, like, be realistic. And yeah, I was just like, I don't agree with that. But anyway, so they're like, "Okay, we'll let you do another art subject, but basically, if you wanna go to an art university, you'll have to do an art foundation." Most people kinda get to the end of their A levels, and then they can choose to do an art foundation or choose to go and get a real job. And they were like, "You have to agree to do an art foundation now and, like, take this kind of, like, prison sentence of art forever." And I was like, "Sign me up, like, I'm down." And they were just kind of baffled by this, but they let me do it. And then the only subject that would fit into my timetable was photography. It wasn't my choice to do photography. I had no interest in photography whatsoever, and I was just like, "That's cool because I'm gonna make all these clothes, and the clothes will need to be photographed, and I can just, like, do the same kind of research project." So I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do photography, cool." So then at my college, photography was taught in an analog form, so we learned how to shoot film, we learned how to develop film in the darkroom, we learned how to print our images ourselves, and there was no funding for, like, digital cameras, and there was no access to digital cameras. They taught us how to use Photoshop, but the only access was, like, film, and we could develop and print, like, the photo print paper, and the, like, chemicals and everything was unlimited. We could just use the darkroom as much as we wanted, and we were encouraged to be in the darkroom all the time. And yeah, we had, like, very little interaction with digital cameras, and so I was introduced to photography in a really traditional format and a really creative one. There was no rules, or, like, it didn't have this, like, perfect, like, restriction to it. And also, like, they built this new art block at which we only got to use once it got to, like, art foundation. So, like, for my A levels, we were in these kind of, like, cabins in these, like, temporary classrooms. So the dark room was, like, this temporary dark room they built in these kind of, like, just like the same kind of cabins they use at festivals for dressing rooms. Like, they were our classrooms, and they were freezing and, like, really ugly and uninspiring. And there are actually, like, really cool pictures that are super bleak because we used to like build pinhole cameras, these little wooden boxes, and expose like the paper in and then like immediately develop it. And I think like it's interesting to reflect on because that was such a privilege to get to learn about photography in that way, and especially like in that time, everything like the digitalization of everything happened really quickly, and everything kind of moved into like a really digital space. Mm, And so like to get to learn photography in such a like pure organic way, like we really were just allowed to play. They had like the big scanners so we could do cyanotypes and we could like paint it on fabric and expose pictures onto fabric. There was just loads of space there so you could make stuff that was like really big and you could make lots of mistakes and you could make a lot of mess. And nothing needed to be like shiny and perfect and polished. It was like encouraged to try loads and loads of different mediums. And then like because I was doing all of the art subjects like in product design, I was doing like woodwork and glass making and like pottery in the kiln and like using all these different materials, and then those materials, like within textiles, the like way that fabrics are put together and stitched together, like all of it could be blended together, and it was just like a really creative outlet. And obviously like the whole time the kind of like school were like shaking their heads at me like, yeah, you're having a fun, but like you aren't gonna have a job in this. And I was just like delulu, like, yeah, like here I am. But yeah. So then what happened? Sorry, I just went off on such a tangent, but it was such a creative time. So then basically what happened is as I was doing these projects, I started to realize that when it came to the end, like when I was making clothes, I didn't really have a desire to make the clothes perfect, to make the clothes like I liked designing clothes and I liked the shapes of clothes and I liked what the clothes said and like how the clothes like communicated with other people, but I just didn't care for like putting a zip in properly or like hemming a trouser properly. And like some people in my class were so amazing at that. And they could just like dart like a shirt and they could do all these techniques that were really difficult so seamlessly. And I was just like, I don't really actually care about the zip being in properly. I actually just care how it looks in the photo. And that's when I started to realize, like, oh, I think it's photography that I want to do because it's like the communication of the fashion that's interesting to me, not necessarily like the physical garment itself, like more the whole image around the garment. So then that's when I kind of like pivoted to fashion photography over like fashion design. And I obviously still continued to make clothes and stuff while I was doing the course. And then, so then I decided I want to do art foundation. And I want to go to LCF to do art foundation. And I applied and I get an interview and I'm so excited. I can't believe it. And I put this portfolio together. The school didn't know how to prepare me for an interview like this. And I didn't even know that I needed to be prepared. I'd never gone to an interview like for anything to do with school. And I just had no knowledge or like education around how anything like this worked. And so I show up, I go down to London and I have my portfolio. And I have this distant memory that maybe like we accidentally left my portfolio on the train and then like had this huge panic where we were like, oh my gosh, has the has the portfolio, like, gone back up and that train goes to, like, Glasgow, and just being like, "Has my portfolio just been sent to Glasgow?" And then them being like, "It's in the lost and found." I'm like, oh, so sure it was at that interview and not my, like, main one. But just, like, pure for your anxiety and panic is the warm up for the for the interview, and then I go, and I have no idea what to expect, and every interview that I've done ever since this for a university thing has always been just one-on-one, me and the head of the course or the lecturer, and, like, normally that person then goes on to become my teacher. And so it's very intimate and personal, and you just get to have like a one-on-one chat with them. But this one wasn't like that at all. This one, they took us into this room and they sat us in chairs in a circle. Well, everyone's got their portfolios. And like, I haven't prepared a speech or anything. I thought I was just going to talk about it or talk about my work or whatever. I didn't even actually have, I had no idea what was going to happen. And they sit us in a circle and everyone goes through their portfolio, and these people had been trained to speak about their work and speak about it intellectually and contextually, and they had pictures of like their work and the references, and I'd never been taught how to do that. And I couldn't believe what I was witnessing because I was like, my portfolio is not this, and I don't even know how to blag that information. I was just terrified. And I remember just being like so scared and so like that fish out of water thing where I just felt like I just didn't have any of the knowledge or skills to be in that space, and I didn't know how to be in that space. And I'd never felt like I just was so underprepared to be in a space before, like ever. And it was such a like shock to my system. It had such an huge impact on me because all the people at the school were like, "You can't do this." And I think when I was in that interview, I was having like an out of body experience, basically just being like, "Oh my God, they were right. I can't do this." I just didn't have a vocabulary like they did, and I didn't have a kind of like art history education or whatever. Just like, aha, this is terrifying, but it was also, like, looking behind the curtain and being like, "Oh, right, this is where I need to be, and this is the level that my work needs to be at, and this is, like, where I need to get to." And so I came away obviously, like, absolutely depleted, terrified, like, so sad. I didn't get in, and I was devastated. And not getting in, that was, like, my first big rejection, and I felt it so deeply because it sucks to be rejected from stuff, but also I think it kind of, like, affirmed all of this stuff that everyone was saying around me that this isn't achievable for you and you can't have this. And then I was like, "Damn, maybe I can't have this. This is way harder than I thought it was gonna be." But it also completely, like, changed my brain chemistry, and I was a completely different person after that, and the way I came back changed, and I was so hungry and so determined, and I was like, "I am gonna make this incredible portfolio, and I know what I need to do now to be at that level, and I'm gonna work so hard to create a portfolio that is, like, a reflection of that." And actually, like, that year is so interesting because my friends, the collaboration in that, year was so inspiring and exciting and, like, fun, but it was also so supportive, and everyone was just down. Like, I was like, "I've got this idea," and everybody brought all of their skills together to bring it to life, and we were all helping each other on each other's projects, and no idea was, like, unachievable. And, I mean, the pictures are, like, I don't know how they would sit now, but I don't think that they're bad, to be honest, because we really like, they might be like dated, but we created these like really exciting images because like I was just like these pictures need to be like groundbreaking in the capacity that like we can create. And yeah, and then I did get in. So, yay me. It's interesting, like the pain of failure. When you feel failure, obviously it sucks and it's horrible. But then when you feel success after failure, it's multiplied. And the feeling of getting in on the course in the end is such a core memory to me. I remember finding out and like jumping on the bed, and in my memory, it's like golden light shining through the window, and you can feel like the warmth of the sun. And I'm so excited. And maybe I would have never pushed myself that hard or just kind of like locked in that way if I didn't get that rejection. And yeah, I think it's good to have gratitude and appreciation for the ups and downs within stories because it I could also have just given up. I think that what is so amazing about the failure is that with inside the failure, I learned how to succeed. Going to that interview and just like sucking at it, I still learned how to do it well. I got to witness what like a good portfolio and I got to see what a good presentation looked like. And that was such incredible insight, which if the interview was one-on-one, I wouldn't have got that. I would have just got rejected and just been like, oh well. But having the humiliation ritual of like sitting in the room of everyone who's been like literally trained to do the interview felt horrible while it was happening, but it taught me where I needed to be. And that's like the best thing that could have happened. And yeah, so that was like the journey into choosing photography. And like I think it's cool because I got there through loads of rejection and redirection, and like I was just kind of like pushed into different spheres and was open to kind of figuring out what felt good and what felt like enjoyable and being okay. I think like I say this all the time, but it's like I really do think that it's like the way that I approach things is I'll set like a main goal that's like really far, like a far goal that I want to achieve. And then I'm kind of like heading in that direction. But if things, whilst I'm on the course to that goal, take me off in a different direction and that feels good or feels right, like it's okay to set a new goal and go off in a new tangent. And obviously that doesn't necessarily work for everybody, but I find that, being really, really, really set on something could actually like end up building resentment because when you get there, maybe it isn't as good as you thought it would be. And you had sacrificed loads of things to get there. But having the like far goal so that you are moving forward, you're making progress and you're heading towards something, but being open to just kind of follow your instincts on that journey creates the possibility for all of this like magic to happen. And like if I hadn't been open, I wouldn't have even found photography. And obviously it feels like divine kind of reflecting on it because I love photography so much. And maybe I would have just found it in a different way. But yeah, like it wasn't modeled to me as a job. And I like really didn't consider it as a job at all. Roundup is I had no idea that I was going to end up in photography, and also the rejection for the Art Foundation did really light such a fire within me to like get to London. I think it's an interesting one because there's so many stats about the arts and kind of like the privilege within it. And, it is a difficult industry to be in, especially if you don't like come from a family that has that knowledge and support and connections and stuff. It is way harder. I think this episode was for people getting into photography and people kind of pursuing a creative career, or just if you're at that point where you're choosing your A-levels or you're figuring out what you want to do. This one's for you. Hopefully it was interesting, and I'll tell you more like outrageous stories in the future. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Connor Schofield for the music. Thank you to Poppy Marriott for the artwork. I'm Charlotte Pamela, and I hope that get to learn great insight from your mistakes. I hope that you receive good news that feels like golden sunlight shining on your face. I hope that you get to feel golden sunlight shining on your face. Oh my gosh. I hope that you have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for listening.